This is KCCK's Culture Crawl. I'm Dennis Green, and my guest today is John Rapson, a face and voice very familiar to musicians and fans of music all up and down the corridor. Director at the faculty member at the University of Iowa. Kind of headed into your last roundup a little bit.
Yeah, we're trying to figure out what to call my last concert. Rapson's last hurrah, or John's last jam, or I think I'm just going to call it bidding farewell. And we're going to bring in people from New York and Los Angeles and Chicago, to people I've recorded with, to kind of have a musical feast out there. But that's a different story.
But that's not, you'll have to come back and talk to us about that. That's not why you're here.
And that's not why I'm here.
We're here as Hot Tamale Louie hits the road. And we'll be in several different locations, but specifically we're talking about the show coming to Cedar Rapids for the very first time. Many of us have seen the show, have had an opportunity to see the show as you've done it in Iowa City at the University of Iowa, and of course just last year, that's electrifying performance at the Iowa City Jazz Festival.
That was pretty fun.
I have not seen a Jazz Fest audience that spellbound very often.
And, as much as I want to receive the adulation, I have to say I think it's a story. It's such a compelling story, and the musicians are fantastic. They're brilliant. So the collaboration is great. But if you don't know the story yet, come to have your thoughts provoked and your heart moved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we've talked before about just how timely it is to be talking about the immigrant experience at this particular time in American history. For those who may not be familiar or heard the story and have forgotten it, this all came about when you read an article in The New Yorker about this Afghan guy who ended up in Wyoming running a tamale stand.
That's exactly right. We could digress to the rest of the backstory, but the point is that I have been challenged to produce a new show for a faculty showcase at the university as we entered our new building. And upon reading this article in the New Yorker by Catherine Schultz, which is called Citizen Khan, I realized that I knew all of the constituent elements in the realization of particular musicians. We had somebody that could do the Middle Eastern component, someone could do the Western component, somebody that could help us out with jazz and the ragtime, and it just all kind of came together in a very short order because it had that kind of galvanizing quality that came from knowing the personalities.
It's the story of Zarif. Am I pronouncing that right?
Well, let me tell you. Zarif Khan is the right way to pronounce it, but his namesake is Zarif Jr. I said, really? He said, yes. Zarif came from Afghanistan. I come from Wyoming. So it's Zarif, as in sheriff.
And this, of course, was his, son or grandson?
This is his son.
His son.
But then
there was a grandson who came with him to the Jazz Festival performance, right?
We had two of the grandsons and then two of the great-grandsons. So Zarif himself is in his 60s somewhere, I don't know, and his two sons are, middle-aged professionals now, and one of them had his two sons with him. So we had three generations of the Khan family in Iowa City last summer.
So it's the story of Zarif, who emigrated from Afghanistan, or what is now Afghanistan.
Oh, actually, what is now Pakistan, right?
Yeah.
It's really changed hands in a number of ways. He identified as Afghan, but at the time it belonged to the English protectorate there near the Khyber Pass, and now that whole region is part of Pakistan.
And settled in Sheridan, Wyoming, and the reason why this all kind of came back to the fore is his descendants wanted to build a mosque there in Sheridan, which had some controversy surrounding it.
Actually, the mosque was being proposed in Gillette, which is a hop and a skip from Sheridan. And some of the local people there formed protests. There were some provocations and some confrontations that they didn't want to see mosques built there, or that they didn't want their culture to change or people to take their jobs. And when the dust settled from the whole thing, it turned out that more than 30 of the people that were founding members had belonged to the Khan family as cousins or uncles or whatever. And they had lived in Wyoming over 100 years. They had been sports heroes and servicemen and belonged to the Rotary. And
So the community wasn't changing at all. It was just a part of the community.
they were just looking for a way to participate in the community in a more extensive way. And the dust did settle. You know, I'm hoping, it's really not clear yet, but I'm hoping that we're going to play at Gillette sometime, because I know that that's not the sentiment of the entire population. The mayor and many of the town people are very happy to give a different picture of Gillette than the one that might come to mind from the article.
Talking with John Rapson about Hot Tamale Louie coming on March 23rd to Sinclair Auditorium on the co-campus. So you read the story, you were inspired, and you know, in most of your career, in most of your compositions have been fairly straight ahead jazz, but you knew with this one you really wanted to incorporate the Western themes that from Wyoming, and of course the Middle East themes from Khan's homeland and things like that. So how did you put that team together?
Well, I want to back up and say that I've always had a strong interest in ethnomusicology, and I've looked at a variety of different traditions. These were new ones for me to look at, but I've always been interested in that. And I would say that the next important ingredient is to just know the personalities of Danyel Gaglione and Dave Moore. I'd never done projects with either of them, but have been friends. Especially, I've known Dave since I first came to Iowa City in '93. So when the project came to mind, I knew I had collaborators that could bring in the elements that would make this truthful, that would make it feel like it had weight and depth to it. I also had some pieces kind of hanging out in my back pocket that I was able to repurpose, and I brought right away to this. And then Danyel brought me some things that he recorded and I transcribed. And, you know, the truth is, it really came together in a whirlwind. In 2 months, we had the whole thing written.
Dave Moore, of course, is well known across Iowa and the whole nation, is a great singer-songwriter. Danyel, however, is he French?
He's French. Right? He's from southern France,
and he moved to Iowa City. And he's not, wasn't involved in the music scene really.
At the time, he was just looking for work. He and his wife had a young child, and that they wanted to be near the grandparents who lived in Iowa, and they had decided to relocate so that they could have the larger context of family around. And Dan Phillips, his father-in-law, I guess you'd call him, had told me that I should meet him and hear this instrument that he played. It was such an unusual instrument, the mandol. And we, pussyfooted around for a while and had some coffees and would talk. And then eventually we both got the courage to sit down in the studio and play together, and figured out what we could do together. And it just sat in that state for about 1.5 years before the concept for this show cropped up, and I realized, okay, I have that component.
But the show also includes narration, and then there's a multimedia aspect too.
Right, over 300 images, and we use silent movie script to tell the story as it's going along, so that people can identify elements of the story with the music that we're putting on.
Well, I have enjoyed it every time I've seen it, and looking forward to seeing it again. It's just I just love the juxtaposition and all the different senses that it, the visual, the auditory, seeing the musicians on stage, seeing John in his cowboy hat that's worth the price of admission right there.
There you go. Yeah. I got myself a bolo tie, and I got one of those big belt buckles now and some boots. So I'm really catching on.
You're
to
ready
the
to go to
costume.
Wyoming.
Yeah.
And just mention just briefly, you're going to be doing the show in some other locations. It's kind of a little mini tour, in fact.
Yeah, this was, we have a partnership with Humanities Iowa, which is the National Endowment for the Humanities wing here in Iowa. And what we did was we raised money to do shows in 4 locations, and then Humanities Iowa matched that amount. So every one of these performances is free. We're going to be playing at Marshalltown High School on Friday, March 8th, and at UNI Gallagher Blue Dorn on Sunday, March 10th. And then 2 weeks later, we come here to Cedar Rapids for the show at Sinclair Auditorium at the Cole College campus. That's Saturday night, the 23rd at 7:30, and it's free.
Okay.
And then Sunday, we're performing in Iowa City once again as the guests of the United Congregational Church there.
Okay. Well, coming to Lynn County for the very first time, it's Hot Tamale Louie, just a real multimedia extravaganza, and so much fun to watch and hear multiple times. And you'll be hearing the music on KCCK, too, periodically, between now and the concert as well. I'm just looking forward to seeing it all again.
Thank you so much, Dennis.
Thanks for coming in, John. You can hear the Culture Crawl live on the radio most Thursdays and Fridays at 10:20, or catch the podcast on your favorite podcatcher app, or download it at kcck.org/culture. I'm Dennis Green.